Welcome, everybody. My name is David Nathaniel, and I'm hosting this Spanish and Portuguese business network and our speaker series. So we're starting off with four speaking events, and this is the third of four. And we've had really interesting speakers in the first two, and I think today is going to be exceptionally good. We have great guests, and I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. So I wanted to introduce our speaker, is from our community. His name is Ronald Reuben. Ron is, well, he's a friend as well as part of our community, a proud member of the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue, and he runs a very interesting business. So without any formal introduction, Ron, what I can say is Ron is definitely an entrepreneur, very strategic. He's built a tremendous business over the years, and he's faced some interesting times during the pandemic. And I guess he's going to share with us how he's been able to manage through and take advantage of the situation. So without any further ado, the floor is yours, Ron.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. And hello, Angie and Jonathan and everybody. So today I'm happy to share with you the Medicom story and how we pivoted our business during the COVID-19 pandemic. One where we are emerging as a new company, what I like to call the Medicom transformation. I founded Medicom in 1988. It was during the AIDS epidemic. I was 23 years old and about to graduate from university with no business experience and limited financial means. The situation at the time was somewhat like what we have experienced the past couple of years. The World Health Organization mandated that all healthcare professionals needed to adhere to universal precautions, which meant wearing gowns, gloves, masks, and the use of other infection control products. A friend of mine at the time was studying medicine at Albert Einstein in New York City and was working at Santa Cabrini Hospital at the emergency department. He called me to ask if I can find him some gloves in Canada. So I opened the yellow pages and looked for glove manufacturers. There was a UK-owned company based in Ajax, Ontario, owned by Smith & Nephew, that was manufacturing surgical gloves. I called and asked if I could buy some gloves. They agreed, but I had to have a business for them to sell to me. So I approached a friend of mine from school who agreed to ask his father to help us set up a business account with a local bank. We opened a small office in a business incubator run by the YMCA in Old Montreal on Prince Street. And that was the beginning. Although we rode the AIDS wave for the first year, it was still a startup and we struggled to survive. The first few years, it was grinding work in a market that was dominated really by giants. And we had to find our niche. In order for us to grow our business and become relevant in the market, we needed to invest in manufacturing and expand out of Canada. The Canadian market was small. This needed funds, which we did not have. And this led to a separation of ways for some of the guys that were involved in the business in its early days. In 1992, I met my business partner and mentor, Morris Goodman. Now, Morris was an established business person who had started a successful pharmaceutical company, Pharmascience. With his guidance and his financial backing, we made our first investment in manufacturing by investing initially in a face mask manufacturing business in Augusta, Georgia, in the US. We expanded to different market segments, including the dental, lab, medical, and safety. And we also expanded geographically, primarily in Asia and Europe. We opened a manufacturing plant in Shanghai, China, the first of its kind, acquired our distributor in Osaka, Japan, and acquired our European manufacturer out of the Netherlands. We avoided the US market at first, knowing that the challenges before us were too high due to well-established and entrenched competition and the need for scale to be relevant. So by 2008, we had a global team of 400. We were generating $100 million in profitable revenues, and things were good. Over the last 32 years, we expanded to include a complete line of infection control and prevention products, keeping true to our tenets of quality, reliability, and value. Fast forward to 2019. Medicom is now one of the world's leading manufacturers of PPE products with a strong focus on face masks, built into a $400 million business through a network of partnerships around the world. Our company kept a diversified manufacturing footprint over 3 continents and built strong relationships with a global customer base, with the largest healthcare distributors in the world. We remained relevant over the years through our commitment to the highest of quality and regulatory standards. We perfected our manufacturing processes over the years with 13 fully owned factories, 17 distribution centers, and sales offices around the world, with our products being sold in over 95 countries. Medicom has remained extremely nimble in our business practices. With entrepreneurial agility, we evolved systems and processes, always enough to support our ongoing double-digit growth as we successfully navigated our way through H1N1, avian flu, SARS, and Ebola, amongst other pandemics, and learned along the way. The customer was always at the center of our decision-making process. Relationships were important, we were flexible, they liked us, and we provided an excellent product and serviced them around the world wherever they were present with the same experience. We grew on their coattails. Most importantly, we also built a strong, global, resilient team that was motivated and had grown up with the business. They had depth of knowledge and experience and were deeply, deeply immersed in the mindset and culture of the business. As you can see here, Medicom's customer base spans a number of Fortune 500 companies, including medical dental experts like Henry Schein, Patterson, as well as retailers like Costco. We built long-term, lasting relationships. Our brand was strong, and that helped contribute to our success in acquiring talent. Medicom has always maintained a strong connection to the local communities it worked in by giving back. I remember personally the importance of people's charity when I needed it. So a pillar of Medicom's strength is ensuring that we are there for our communities. Medicom continues to provide support to local hospitals on Montreal Island, local food banks, and other programs like Centraid. Then COVID hit, a pandemic with a global reach and magnitude against which there was no way to prepare for. This resulted in deep and unprecedented issues, including a significant disruption to our global supply chain, at the same time as the world shipped its PPE to Asia to try to contain the virus there, creating what would translate into critical shortages in the rest of the world. We saw governments ban export of PPE and experience the appropriation of our factories in China, Taiwan, and France. We witnessed government unpreparedness around the world as they admitted to the suspension and or mismanagement of stockpiles for exactly such a pandemic. Suddenly, price was not the driving factor as the world faced a shutdown and battled the virus more threatening than anything else ever seen since the Spanish flu. Availability, security of supply, and quality assurance became the primary concerns. So our 30 plus years of experience in the pandemic business, our extensive, internal and external network, our ability to ramp up quickly, and our deep understanding of regulatory requirements on a global level allowed us to step up and respond immediately. Timing was everything, and Medicom was in the right time in the right place to be able to provide much needed solutions to a market that was in crisis. There is a Hebrew acronym for luck, or mazal. Makom, zimun, limud. Makom for place, zimun for time, and limud for knowledge. Medicom was in the right place at the right time with the right knowledge to help the world get through COVID. We had our luck. Following our experience with SARS in 2003, we knew at the time that our factories in China may be expropriated. We never expected that this was going to be true as well in Taiwan, much less in France and even the US. Following the appropriation of our factory in France by the French government, we realized how much help there could be to partnership and solutions, as they brought in the army to help optimize supply output. The government officially announced that the reliance on foreign supply for critical PPE was deemed no longer acceptable. And at Medicom, we realized that we were uniquely positioned with our diversified footprint and our long history of manufacturing expertise. Planning and long-term supply reached a pinnacle of importance. We began dealing directly with governments around the world. Prior to that, we were only dealing with distribution companies. Now we went direct to governments. We helped them understand how our extensive network could help them. Our pitch was simple: supply chain sovereignty and domestic resilience. We tapped into our network of deep and experienced manufacturing personnel, leveraged our global quality network at a time when travel was impossible, and partnered with a vast network of raw material suppliers who have known us throughout the years. Government trusted our global certifications that attested to our ability to ensure quality medical products in multiple jurisdictions. We created a government relations team and mobilized a network of internal and external experts. We established a pivot team with our global partners to envision our transformation as we focused on the most critical entry into infection control, medical face masks, specifically N95 face masks. We brought in the resources needed, and in March 2020 closed an agreement with the Canadian and Quebec government to build a local mask factory, signing an unprecedented 10-year supply deal. We then proceeded to do the same in France, in Singapore, and in the UK. The future is all in the execution. In 2019, we sold 1 billion masks. In 2022, we have sold over 5 billion. In dollars, we have grown from a $400 million company worldwide, pre-COVID, to over $1.5 billion this past year. We transformed rapidly to face a challenge. We hired over 600 employees in 2 years. And as we continue to build our capabilities for the future, including project management, manufacturing, engineering, long-term contracting and government relations, drawing from other companies that were on a hiatus or shuttered due to the pandemic. We did all this, all the while respecting our company values, ensuring that our growth did not get in the way of who we are and what we stood for. We take pride in protection and deliver it around the world. We are now building a new facility to manufacture innovative raw materials for filter media in Saint-Eustache, Quebec, to ensure that we will no longer have to rely on a broken supply chain, as well as to invest in innovation to manufacture sustainable biodegradable PPE in an ethical manner, a first of its kind. We're investing heavily in automation and AI to ensure that whatever we are building will be viable for the long term. We're onshoring the manufacture of medical gloves. After over 30 years, where most of the production was offshore to Southeast Asian countries, many of these manufacturers are using indentured labor, a form of modern-day slavery. The first European plant will come online by end of 2023 in France, followed by another facility here in Canada, in London, Ontario, that was just announced. These are large-scale industrial projects with many challenges for our organization to overcome. Our intention is to build facilities and deliver products that is sustainable to the environment. Again, a first of its kind. We're investing back in the business, upwards of $100 million to date, a 10x increase in CapEx, so that we can face these challenges, remaining proud of our purpose and delivering protection the world can count on. Our plans are to invest an additional $280 million in new manufacturing facilities globally over the next 24 months. Corporate social responsibility. It may be a buzzword for most, but we take it seriously. Medicom abides by international and domestic laws. When our competitors use slave labor to achieve the best price, Medicom strongly believes that in diversity, there is strength. I come from Iraqi refugees who sought a better life in Israel and in Canada. It was not easy. I ensure that my company strongly supports involvement of dynamic immigrants and diversity of experience. This is the secret of our success. We are also signatories of the federal government's 50-30 challenge to involve more women and people of diverse background into leadership positions. I'm happy to say that 50% of Medicom senior management are females. While I talked about our local involvement in philanthropy already, Medicom gives globally to familiar organizations like the Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières, amongst others, that are less than well known. Medicom also believes in protecting the planet. That is why I have my researchers work on more biodegradable and environmentally friendly products. We're also standing up our glove facilities in a manner which is far more sustainable than current production in Malaysia. Just as Medicom takes pride in protecting healthcare workers, we take pride in protecting the planet. So why us? While others have pivoted in the PPE space, few that have grown their order book by more in the absolute. I doubt there are many that have stretched themselves further and adapted more profoundly in relation to where they were pre-COVID-19. And I think the reasons we have done so is fourfold. Number one, institutional capabilities and scale to be compelling to national authorities while leveraging global quality systems. Number two, our global footprint to provide comprehensive one-stop solutions. Number three, previous deep experience with pandemics and epidemics around the world enabled us to assess the situation and think quickly on our feet. And number four, the most important one, the unwavering commitment of our people. So I'd like to thank you for listening to me share with you my journey in building Medicom and the pivot we made over the last couple of years. And now I would like to introduce Angie Hall and Jonathan Raymond. But before I do, if there's any questions or comments, please feel free.
Yes, if anyone has any questions or comments, just unmute yourselves and go ahead and speak away.
Hi, Ronnie. My name is Emil Shiri, and I'm glad to say that I use your products every day, as you can see.
I see that. Those are good pouches.
This is not a plug because I use your products every day. I must say they're of extremely good quality and very good value as well. So whatever you're doing well. But I must say I do have some recommendations for you to make your products better, because I use them every day and I know the intricacies of using these things. And maybe one day we'll meet and we can discuss that.
I would love first of all, to meet you and for you to meet some of our product development people. They are always, they always have their ears open and they always want to improve and learn. So that's anytime great. You have time, come visit us on our facilities and we'll also show you around.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question, which is for this kind of exponential growth, what would you say? I mean, I'm sure you faced many, many challenges, Ron, but as an individual running the business, being the CEO, what would you say, not so much what were the challenges, but because there were many, but how have you been able to manage through these challenges? Good, not, and when I say challenges, I don't mean bad challenges. I mean opportunistic challenges, winning some of these contracts, managing through supply chain issues, all of these things that you face in as you've expanded your business. Be interesting to hear, what life's been like for you and how you've managed things through.
Well, we managed this entire process through the pandemic, where everything was shut down pretty much. So a lot of things were a lot of travel and a lot of what we normally do was put on a pause. At the same time, work was one thing, but there was also the personal side, the life side. And as you know, you and I had, we have a committed date that we used to go. We're still trying to, but we used to walk every Sunday morning and spend time just talking, reflecting, and taking care of ourselves as well. So there was a balance. There was family, there was a family bucket, there was a personal bucket, and there's a work bucket. And you really try to keep them all at an even level. So that was what I was trying to do, and it actually helped quite a bit. The fact also that we had a team that was very focused and very dedicated around the globe, that we'd meet every morning, 5 days a week for 15 minutes, half an hour, to deal with the issues that were coming up on a daily basis also helped quite a bit from the work perspective. So I'm not sure if I'm answering you, David, but these are the really the more pronounced things that impacted me and helped in managing both the growth of the business and also the issues that we were dealing with during the pandemic.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments to make? Okay. So let me introduce Angie and Jonathan. So Ms. Hall is the head of sustainable finance at commercial finance in financing in HSBC Canada. In this role, Angie is responsible for leading the sustainable finance proposition in Canada and executing on HSBC's global commitment to provide at least $750 billion US dollars in sustainable finance by 2030. Under Angie's leadership, HSBC has developed the largest sustainable finance product suite in Canada and has focused on ensuring businesses of all sizes are able to access the capital they require to successfully transition their operations to thrive in a low carbon economy. And Mr. Raymond, Jonathan, is the VP and lead team and team lead, I should say, at corporate banking at HSBC Canada. His team provides coverage principally for private companies headquartered in Quebec, with financing ranging from 10 million to 200 million Canadian. And Jonathan has also been actively involved with sustainability-related initiatives over the past 2 years for the bank. Previously, Jonathan also spent time in Europe, where he headed the international banking team in Paris from 2010 to 2013. And I've personally known Jonathan for many years, and I could say he's a stand-up, a very astute individual. So take it from there.
Thank you,
Ron. And
thank you, Ron.
So I will leave the floor to you guys now.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Ron. And maybe a quick note on Medicom. We've been privileged to follow the business for a few years now, and I think it's an amazing story, one. And two, I feel we're lucky to have a business like this in Canada, in Quebec, in Montreal. This business could well be in the US. So yeah, well done. And again, we're really happy to be, a little part of the story in the past few years. So
thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Actually, a very big part. You've always been a very good partner to us.
Yeah. So thanks for that. So David and I spoke about presenting some material to your group. We're really happy to join you today. And we thought it would be interesting to talk about sustainability and sustainable finance. And by the way, now we talk more about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. So it's not just about the environment. And as you know, at HSBC, we invested a lot of efforts, time, money, and resources to be at the forefront of initiatives. And joining me today, I'm very excited, we have Angie Hall, who's based in Vancouver. She runs sustainable finance for HSBC in Canada. And she's going to cover a few points, a few topics. This is meant to be interactive. So if you have any questions, any comments, we'd be happy to have you raise your hand or share your thought. And on that note, Angie, over to you, and thanks for joining.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan, and appreciate the presentation, Ron. Really interesting to learn more about the business and clearly an incredible example of resilience and opportunity through the pandemic. So appreciate hearing from you. I'll share some slides here. And as Jonathan said, I'm very keen to have this be interactive. I know sustainable finance is relatively new within the Canadian market. So really keen to hear from yourselves around what's most interesting and where you think this might be relevant for yourselves. So to kick things off, exactly as Jonathan just mentioned, sustainability is bigger than just the environment. And actually, a lot of folks think about sustainability as the green angle coming first. But when we think about environmental social governance, it's really the governance that came first. You think about what corporate citizens have been focused on for decades, really what the public markets have been focused on. And clearly quality governance structures have been at the heart of where a lot of focus has been for many, many years. So we're already well on our way. The green was really what focused or what followed as we focus on trying to address climate change and ensuring that corporates are well positioned for a low carbon economy. And then the rise of social has been a real trend in the last 18 months, particularly through the pandemic, financing specific with addressing the pandemic directly, as well as financing that we've seen associated, trying to drive to the heart of other social challenges to ensure that we have that sustainability baked into our corporate ethos. At HSBC, we've been close to sustainability for quite some time, particularly given our European headquarter. We're very close to really the heart of where sustainable finance has evolved. We're a signatory to the Paris Agreement and have three commitments that I think are particularly relevant to the business community. The first is a commitment to be net zero within our own operations by 2030. So that's really focusing on our travel, our real estate footprint, just the general emissions created by the operation of the bank. And then we have a far more ambitious commitment to be net zero in our financed emissions by 2050. And really what that looks at is the underlying emissions generated by all of our borrowers on a global basis and striving to achieve net zero across that portfolio in under 3 decades. Finally, and as it was alluded to in my introduction, we aspirationally have committed to providing $1 trillion US into the global economy in sustainable finance by 2030. And so the main mandate of my role here in Canada is to help Canadian corporates access as much of that financing as possible. So just a bit of background, I'm sure this won't come as a surprise to anyone, but when we look at the evolution of sustainability, there's been a dramatic increase in the pace, particularly in the last 24 months. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the government of Canada has legislated net zero by 2050 and has set a target to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 in line with that goal. We've seen the federal carbon tax established within the country, as well as a variety of different provincial and municipal commitments, Quebec really being a leading market in Canada. When we pull back and look at the corporate angle, I mean, investors have been demanding greater sustainability disclosures for quite some time. The topic of disclosure is certainly one of the most popular areas of discussion in sustainability these days. Many of you may have seen the SEC announcement recently around mandatory Scope 1 and 2 emissions disclosure. The expectation is that the CSA will follow with similar standards. And for those of you saying, well, I'm a private business, how is this relevant to me? I think a really interesting fact is that, where Europe leads, the Americas and Canada tend to follow. And we've seen recent regulatory requirements for businesses in the UK with turnover greater than £25 million to bring in mandatory Scope 1 and 2 emissions disclosure to that level of business as well. So really demonstrating that.
Hey, Angie, sorry to jump in.
No,
So,
not at all.
what's a scope 1?
Ah.
What's a scope 2 emission? Right,
No,
Ron? David?
That's perfect. No, thank you, Jonathan, for keeping me honest here. So when we think about emissions generated by businesses, there's really 3 categories: scope 1, 2, and 3. When we talk about scope 1 emissions, these are the direct emissions generated by your business. So think about a transportation business. It's the vehicles delivering freight. For a manufacturing business such as Ron's, it's the emissions generated to keep those machines running and really in the production of the final product. Scope 2 emissions are your indirect emissions. So really looking generally at energy consumption in your real estate footprint. You'll see a lot of commitments to address scope 2 emissions through the procurement of renewable energy. Again, in Quebec, for your local manufacturing, at least, you benefit, as we do in BC as well, from a strong hydro grid. But when you think about manufacturing in places like across Asia and India and Vietnam in particular, and China, the volume of coal used in production there is a big focus on for scope 2 emissions for producers. And then scope 3 emissions are really the most interesting and the most tricky to wrap your arms around. So depending on the business that you're in, scope 3 are all of the emissions either generated by your supply chain or by the use of your product. And so 2 examples of how that plays out would be in retail apparel. Approximately 96% of emissions for most large brands are in the scope 3 category because they've outsourced the actual manufacturing. And so you'll see a lot of retail businesses talking about trying to drive better sustainability performance through their supply chain to decrease their scope 3 emissions. When you look at energy and fossil fuel production on the other side, it's the scope 3 emissions are talking about the use of the product. So there's a certain GHG impact just from the production, refinement of oil and gas. But then there's also all of the emissions generated through the operation of vehicles or any other sort of combustion engine. So that kind of gives you a bit of a picture of what's included in that scope 1, 2, and 3. So for the bank, our scope 1 and 2 is that target that I referred to for 2030. It's our travel, it's the operation of our real estate, and kind of everything in that core function. And then our scope 3 emissions are those financed emissions, which are the emissions generated through the capital that we've put out to the market. Next slide here just speaks to the trends or the performance of the sustainable finance market in 2021 using the best available Bloomberg data. You can see on the top half of the slide the bond market and the dramatic growth on a global basis between 2020 and 2021, with volumes in 2020 just under 600 billion, growing to nearly 1.1 trillion in 2021. Europe remains the dominant market in the space, close to 60% of total issuances, but the Americas are catching up with almost a 20% share of total volumes in 2021. And this certainly reflects what we're seeing in customer conversations. We're very proud to have recently been the co-structuring advisor for the Government of Canada's inaugural green bond, which was issued about a month and a half ago now for 5 billion, and certainly a trend there. Looking to the lower half of the slide, this is the sustainable finance loan market. Obviously, data is imperfect given that there is not required public disclosure of these volumes, but you can really see the substantial growth, particularly between 2020 and 2021. And you also see the differentiation there between the percentage of total volumes, which are from the sustainability linked product suite compared to the traditional green loan product suite. And I'll get into that in just a moment here. The final piece that I really love to call out is just looking at the pie chart, the diversity of industries that are leveraging the sustainable finance proposition. This is not just a conversation for renewable energy or electric vehicle producers. We're really getting to the place of acknowledging that in order to address climate change and achieve net zero by 2050, the entire economy needs to be engaged. And so the sustainable finance product suite has also evolved to support all of our corporate customers in achieving or in receiving the investments they need to thrive in a low carbon economy.
Yeah.
So just a quick overview of the product suite here. There's really 2 categories of products that you hear about within sustainable finance. The first is what's called use of proceeds. And so this is anything where you see a capital G green. At HSBC, we're able to offer our full credit and lending as well as our trade product suite with that green labeling to it. And what that means is that the underlying projects being financed qualify under the green loan principles, which are a third-party standard that kind of governs the suite as a whole. And so some examples where we see folks often using green loans, green leases, green trade finance products are in the construction or retrofit to green building standards, acquisition of
Don't send it yet, huh?
the acquisition of any kind of electric vehicle. Everyone thinks about trucks and cars first, but we've seen quite a diversity in Quebec. We've helped to finance some bicycle manufacturers with traditional and e-bikes, some electric scooters. In BC, we're hoping to close soon a transaction for the first electric Zamboni on our portfolio. So really kind of helps to frame out just how broad the conversation can be. Electric forklifts are certainly an increasing product that we're seeing from our customers. That just gives you a bit of an example there. We've also seen a lot of the inputs into green projects. So green buildings to a LEED gold standard are a common construction project that we finance. But we've also started looking at suppliers. So producers of LED lighting solutions, producers of windows and doors that achieve passive house or LEED standard in energy efficiency, and really kind of pulling the whole ecosystem together. Common question I get are the financial incentives for the product. The product is structured in line with conventional financing. So we do stretch and we do kind of push our teams to really ensure that our green offerings are market leading, but generally credit terms are directionally consistent with conventional financing. The reason for that is because the debt is quite protected. And so what I mean by that is the documentation around the green product suite sits outside of the credit agreement or facility letter. And if anything ever changed in the use of proceeds, the green labeling falls away, but the underlying debt is protected. So there's no event of default or covenant breach, which is kind of where you get that catch. So the next question then is why do we see customers leveraging the product? And really, it's all about stakeholder engagement. And listening to Ron's presentation, it's clear the value of large multinational corporates as well as government customers. And these are two groups in particular where we're seeing a real increase in questions to their supply chain around ESG performance. And so kind of tying it back to that scope 1, 2, and 3 idea, Ron's scope 1 emissions feed into the government and into Costco and all of those corporates. Their scope 3 emissions are picking up the emissions produced. And so we're seeing more and more customers that are being asked by their customers, what are your emissions? Have you started the process to baseline the scope 1 and 2 emissions, at least within your production? And that's, I would say the first angle of how this is really being driven through the economy. The second is around employee engagement. We're seeing more and more staff and in a difficult labor market to recruit and retain, being able to articulate how your business is engaged with sustainability. There's the having sustainable finance baked into your balance sheet is a tangible demonstration to how that's being implemented across the value chain and within the organization, beyond just a single individual who might be owning sustainability. And then the last one that I always encourage folks to think about, there's a huge focus on ESG risk and opportunity management from the private equity community. And so to the extent that you're considering exiting your business or looking to attract outside investment, they're really common questions that we're seeing being asked now during the valuation process. So that's use of proceeds. The next main category that we have.
Angie, is it fair to say, like, I'm seeing this more and more with our customers, is whenever they approach Walmart and the likes, majors, Home Depot, whatnot, there's always a question, okay, so what's your kind of plan for sustainability?
Yeah.
I guess you're seeing this across Canada. Is that a fair point? Because we have seen that in Quebec a lot.
We're seeing it around the world, and certainly it's consistent across Canada. Any kind of large customer on a corporate or government side is already asking, and even some of smaller customers are starting to increasingly build this into their RFP process. HSBC, we have it in our RFP process. And again, pulling it back to that ESG framework, it's not just questions around emissions. We're also seeing more and more customers being asked things around the diversity of their workforce, around some of their engagement on those social metrics as well. So quickly, appreciate, I want to leave time for questions, and we're coming close to the top of the hour. The second product suite, and really where we're seeing the largest acceleration in sustainable finance is in sustainability linked facilities, so loans and bonds. And really what this product does is it pulls back, and instead of looking at the use of proceeds, it looks at the corporate strategy. And so targets or metrics are selected, targets are set, broken down into annual increments. And pardon me, if those targets are met, pricing improves. If those targets are not met, pricing increases. And so really it's a way for a corporate to tie their cost of capital to their ESG commitment. And again, drive that alignment across the institution of sustainability and key values into all operations. So the finance team can't say things like, well, this isn't relevant to me. Really, again, just driving that idea of the full business at the table. And then there are a number of investment products, including green deposits and some money market funds that are available for those of you who are not on the borrowing side of the conversation. Some really quick case studies. The first green loan that was done in Canada, HSBC was proud to act as the green coordinator for Concert Properties, the construction of a LEED Gold property here in British Columbia. And just traditional construction finance with that green labeling overlaid, and happy to circulate the presentation as well. I know they're pretty text heavy slides here. Second transaction we have to highlight is Quadragym. And so this is a sustainable trade instrument or a green letter of credit. Our customer is a clean tech business that is building a manufacturing facility in India. And the letter of credit we issued was a backstop to local financing there. And the reason that this qualifies within the use of proceeds is because the ultimate purpose of the manufacturing facility was the manufacturing of clean tech. And then finally, on the sustainability linked loan front, a C-SPAN major constructor and lessor of ships put an SLL in late 2020 that had two main KPIs. The first, to reduce the emissions, their scope 1 and 2 emissions, so the footprint from the construction process of their fleets. And the second, really again, looking at that scope 3 concept. While they build the ships, they don't actually operate them. So the second KPI looked at baking into the percentage of contracts that they had with their customers that included environmental tenets around operating the ships in the most energy efficient manner possible. So it starts to give a bit of the flavor of how the product suite can be leveraged and kind of creatively structured to best fit the borrower that's leveraging the product.
And Angie, maybe real quick on this, because I think that's a good example of not all businesses will be green. Mm-hmm. and think transport, like transport by boat is, obviously heavy on the emission side, but what the product does in financing is if they're able to reduce their emission by a number of steps, then the pricing that we offer reduces a bit. So we encourage companies to do that. But on the opposite, if it gets worse or they don't meet their target, then the pricing increases. Absolutely. So we're not doing much as a bank, if we're honest, but we're still trying to engage with customers and make sure there's at least a path to improvement over time if they wish to subscribe some of those products.
No, it's really interesting, and I made a comment before most folks were able to join around, we're meeting customers where they are. And so the expectation isn't that everyone has all of the questions answered and all of the data already collected. It's much more about, if some are already there and ready to launch these structures tomorrow, and some we're having conversations about, okay, aspirationally in the next 3 years, we'll be looking to launch an SLL. Let's start talking today about where the strategy needs to be, what data is required, and then building the financing product that follows. Albert, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you for your presentations, Angie and Ron. You spoke of sustainability and the environment. I'd like to focus on one particular example, and that refers to Ron's amazing presentation. Let's look at, if my memory serves me right, I think you mentioned the figure of 6 billion masks being produced. 6 billion masks are being discarded after their use. The question I have is, are they biodegradable? One. And the other thing is, I understand that when they're being discarded, they end up sometimes in the ocean, and the loops create a hazard for the fish. The fish get caught in the loops. So I've heard people say, before you discard those masks, try and remove the loops or tear off one end of the loop. And I was wondering if you'd considered these, if you'd given consideration to these ideas in terms of your masks, not to speak of the gloves as well, but let's focus on masks.
So these are good questions, Albert. So two things. Our products are probably the most environmentally unfriendly products out there. In terms of landfill, they're 100 years plus. And that's what we are working very hard in terms of reducing that type of a footprint. What we are doing, as a case in point, as an example, we are investing right now over $40 million in setting up a manufacturing facility to manufacturing the melt load, the raw material that you make, that makes the filter in the masks. And we could have invested $3 or $4 million as opposed to $40 million. The reason we invested that kind of money, those kind of funds, is to also allow us to innovate, to ensure that we are providing product for the next generation that is environmentally friendly, compostable, and biodegradable. To do that is not easy because a lot of these products are derivatives from oil. And now we are actually very close to coming up within, I think, the next 12 to 18 months, we will be coming up with a completely 100% biodegradable mask. That's a major thing. At the same time, we are investing in recycling in businesses that have recycling methods that can be coupled as a complementary service to our products. So we're always working in that front. Gloves as another product that is has a very strong environmental impact. Again, we're working on polymers and molecules that we can introduce into those gloves so that when they hit the ground, they may not become biodegradable, but they're better than 100 years in the landfill. They could be degraded over 10 years. These are the things that we are working on. And so that's on one side. On the other side, we are investing in manufacturing facilities that are are sustainable. Example: instead of using gas, we are looking at using biomass to fuel those facilities. These are additional investments, and I'm glad to hear, Angie, that there is financing that is available for these types of projects, because they're over and above than what is required today. And we are looking at the future. So, Albert, good question. And this is where I hope other companies, like-minded companies, also follow through. But also, don't forget your dollars, when you're spending them, make sure that you're spending them in products that are more attuned to the environment, more attuned to companies that have corporate social responsibility policies, not just the lowest price. And I'm very confident moving forward. Many companies, including a lot of our customers, companies like Costco, as example, or Henry Schein or Kirk Cardinal, they are all looking that because they are public companies, they have pressure to ensure that there is a sustainability narrative. They are also asking for more sustainable products. So a long answer, but I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ron. If I may, maybe make one suggestion. Put a note on the mask or somewhere indicating that when people discard their masks, they should maybe tear off one end of the loops so that they remain loose and not cause a hazard for sea the fish in the sea and whatever else animals get entangled in those things. Just a thought, just an idea.
Something I'll just quickly comment on. I know we're almost out of time, but one of the most exciting parts about working in this space is just the level of collaboration and innovation you see. And so I know I've read some articles recently that Mohawk College in Hamilton, there's some students that have developed a method of recycling masks into some composite products for the production of furniture and kind of different composite lumber. And so you just really start to see that trend, I think, on the larger scale and disruptive technologies. Obviously, the challenge with the electrification of all of our transportation fleets is the question around batteries and battery recycling. And so now we're starting to see a lot of investment in the technologies to recycle the metals within the batteries to ensure that both there is that recycling component there and that we're able to mitigate the number of natural resources we need to be extracting in order to produce these products. So I think oftentimes when we have a great solution to a problem, you learn about the further impacts that that solution creates, and it's just that that virtuous cycle of innovation and R&D that helps us to improve as a community.
Thank you. Well, I'll make just a comment that I'm really, so this is honestly, I had not heard of sustainable financing, past a couple months ago when Jonathan shared that with me. And, but I'm really pleased that private business, government are getting together to make our planet more sustainable. We hear in the news all the time about sort of the lack of progress. But I think there is a lot of progress happening. And I think maybe we don't see it. So I think here in terms of sustainable financing is really interesting. I think the government, like today, this morning, so I'm in the lighting business. This morning, I was reviewing an amendment to the Energy Efficiency Act that the Canadian government had put out in 2015, and it's now in the building code in Quebec. For any new construction, and it covers many areas, HVAC and whatnot, but specific to lighting is you're going to be limited to how much energy you can use per square foot, depending on what the application is, and all those lighting fixtures are going to have to be controllable, either at the site, say with it could be a wall switch, it could be a smartphone, and right now the technology is shifting so that you can actually control the lights remotely via the internet, and that's an area that we are really focused on, and believe that there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity, for commercial users. I know it exists in the homes today, and Philips Hue and other types of consumer type smart lighting products. But right now, I think, with the focus on commercial and industrial, the impact is going to be much more significant. And so it's nice to see that everybody, or a lot of us, are sort of rowing in the same direction, and hopefully this is all going to bear well for society and for our planet. So I want to thank you very much for participating. It's really very much appreciated. So I guess on that note, I want to thank everyone who attended, and we'll be sharing the recording of this presentation in the next few days, which I just have it edited, and then we'll put it out and make sure that everyone has a chance to look at it or share it. If you came in late, or if you thought it was really interesting and you wanted to share it with somebody else, you'll be able to do that. So again, I do also want to say, since this is a synagogue event for the Spanish and Portuguese, I do want to thank, first of all, Ron, Angie, and Jonathan for making time, because you can see that they prepared for this. as well as they've taken time out of, I'm sure, their very busy schedules. I also want to thank, on behalf of the synagogue, Ron has been a great supporter, both in spirit and in financially. He's part of the Major Donors Program. He's supported and was very active in supporting the annual giving campaign last year, and is currently doing the same for this year's campaign. And I'd like to thank HSBC for a long history of supporting the Spanish and Portuguese, and most recently last year's annual giving campaign, and we hope again this year for this year's campaign. So thank you again to all, and we wish you the very best. Have a great afternoon.